Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's tasting. Happy Saturday night. I'm Scott Jones. I am the host of tonight's Vino Italiano virtual wine tasting. Glad to see all of you here. Looks like we've got a good crowd and more are joining. So welcome. Happy Saturday night. Hopefully all of you have poured up a glass of the Prosecco. If not, go ahead and pop the cork now. No time like the present. That's where we're going to start. And you guys can be sipping along as we kind of roll through some of the introductory items. But before we go any further, I want to give a special shout out to all the moms and dads for making it through another week of school. So cheers, everyone, especially those parents who have been wrangling kids all week. Have a good time tonight, and here's to a well-deserved glass of, or two or three of wine. So cheers. For those of you who are first timers to Jones is Thirsty, have a quick slide here, run through some quick kind of housekeeping things. I definitely want you to be asking questions. These events are always more fun and way more engaging when we're having a dialogue, you're asking questions. Feel free to unmute yourself at any point and ask a question. Happy to answer anything and everything I can. And if you don't feel comfortable making yourself live, you can ask it in the group chat. I have the chat pulled up right now, and we'll be happy to answer those questions verbally. We're going to hear a little bit more about Jones Valley Teaching Farm in a sec, but tonight's virtual tips will go to Jones Valley Teaching Farm. You can send those through Venmo to Jones is Thirsty, and we'll corral all of those up at the end of the night and send those over to the great team at Jones Valley Teaching Farm. And for those of you who are entertaining tonight with family and friends, I know many of you do these wonderful charcuterie platters and have these great spreads going, but if you share it on Instagram or social media, please tag me in there. I'd love to see all the cool things you're doing. One of my favorite things after these events is to go onto social media and see all of the really amazing hosts and hostesses out there who are putting on some pretty snazzy virtual wine tasting parties. So I think that about covers it. And right now, one thing I did want to add is if you don't already have the red wine, the Abruzzo open, go ahead and do that because we want to let it, it's a young, fresh wine. You want to let that thing have a chance to breathe a little bit. So go ahead and do that. We're going to dive into that one a little later, but go ahead and pop the cork now. As mentioned, tonight's virtual tip jar recipient is Jones Valley Teaching Farm, and their director, Amanda Story, is here to tell us a little bit about the farm and some of the cool things they're doing in the community and with Birmingham students. So welcome, Amanda.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Everybody good? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for allowing us to be the recipient of tonight's tip jar. We were thrilled. And I'm thrilled. One of our board members is actually, Eva, is on here and actually treated me to the wine. So I will be joining along instead of
Excellent.
just a speaker. So, but Jones Valley Teaching Farm is a nonprofit here in Birmingham, Alabama. We, and a lot of folks just know us for our downtown farm, which is our most popular farm because it's in the middle of downtown Birmingham. But we actually operate 7 teaching farms, 7 total teaching farms in the city of Birmingham. 6 of those are actually on school campuses. So we partner with Birmingham City Schools, and we actually employ full-time instructors and farmers. We're a team of 24 people with a $1.8 million budget, where we are able to actually deliver curriculum throughout the school day. So we essentially create crop plans around fraction chili. If you're in the 4th grade and you've got to learn about fractions, we make chili and we grow all the peppers and the tomatoes to go with it. We could be doing victory gardens for World War II and social studies. We take a trip quite a bit down the Silk Road as we trade spices with young ones, and we create our own curry spice, and then we make this delicious meal at the end of our lesson. So the basis of what we do is we take the power of growing food, which we feel is so essential to our daily lives, whether it is what we consume, how we interact with each other, but also how we grow our food and what it means to our community. So we take that and we use that as the foundation for learning. So all of our students, all 3,500 that we get the honor of working with, actually gets to be part of this and to actually grow their own food. They get to sell their own food, and they get to, we actually have a youth employment program. So now high schoolers can walk across the street from Woodlawn High School and actually work with us part-time. So we are incredibly thrilled to also announce, which will actually be announced this week. We've been under wraps, so you're actually the first people to hear this, but we're breaking ground in 2 weeks on our downtown farm on what we're calling the Center for Food Education.
Excellent, Amanda. That's so cool.
Yes, so we will be a hub for the Southeast for training around food-based education. We will have cooking demonstrations. We will really have a hub for food-based everything in the city of Birmingham and really put that on the map. So you'll hear about that in the news this week, and we're thrilled to get started. And things like this can happen and connect directly with our community. So thanks for having us. If y'all have any questions throughout the time, let me know. But we're thrilled to do work in Birmingham. We're thrilled to do work with Birmingham City School students, and to continue to put food in the forefront of how our community can change and how we can be with one another. It's what we always say, that is a uniter.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Amanda, thanks so much. I appreciate you sharing all that great information and breaking that awesome news here. I have, some of you know, 2 daughters, one's 20, one's 18. They grew up going to Jones Valley, not only like picking up fresh produce, but going to educational events there, going to food festivals there. I have some pictures I was looking at earlier this week of my oldest, and there was an event there with the Southern Foodways Alliance, and just a lot of great memories. It's an incredible resource, and Amanda, appreciate all the great work that that your group is doing in our community. So now I hope you're off the clock and you can sit back and enjoy some great wines. Okay, well, let's go ahead, and if you haven't poured that glass of Prosecco, now's a good time to get a big tall glass of Prosecco or pop the cork. Definitely do not wait on me, because what I'm going to do is, I'll just tell you candidly, of all of the countries, wine producing countries around the world, I think I am most intimidated by Italy. It can be very confusing. I love the wines, but there's a lot to know about Italy. So I felt like in order to set the stage for what we're going to do tonight, I wanted to bring a little context in terms of the regions of Italy, not only where the wines come from that we're going to be looking at tonight, but some of the the points and regions and cities that you might always know. I always find that when I'm learning something new, if I can have a point of familiarity, whether it's hey, I've been to Florence, I know where Tuscany is. Okay, I've got that in my mind, so I can build from that. I take the knowledge that I know, and then I'm able to snap on the new information. So we're going to learn a good bit tonight. There won't be a test, but we're going to cover a good bit of stuff. So I just wanted to start with kind of the overview of Italy, and you'll see over there on the in the northwest we have Piedmont and the city of Turin. And if you are fans of wines from Piedmont, you will know that perhaps one of Italy's most famous red wines, Barolo, and kind of its first cousin, Barbaresco, are from Piedmont. And that's made with the famous red grape called Nebbiolo. Piedmont is also home to Asti. And you probably know Asti from Moscato d'Asti, which is a lightly effervescent kind of sweet wine that comes from Asti. And there's also a red grape that's one of my favorite red grapes called Barbera. And you often find it in Piedmont from Barbera d'Asti or Barbera d'Alba. And then bumping over to Lombardy, that's the region that's home to Milan. And in terms of wine, that's where Franciacorta comes from. And Franciacorta is the Italian sparkling wine that's made in the style of champagne. So it has a second fermentation in the bottle. And that's a different style of sparkling winemaking. And we'll talk about that when we talk about Prosecco. And then if you go over to the east, you're getting over near the Adriatic, which is where we'll be hanging out initially with the Prosecco. You'll see Friuli, and that's where Pinot Grigio comes from. And then you kind of bump on down to Emilia-Romagna, and that's home to one of my current favorite wines, which is Lambrusco, particularly the Grasparosa grape version of Lambrusco. I just love it. I've served it at a couple of wine events this summer, and it's just been a smash hit. But if you don't know Lambrusco, get to know it. It's good. But you also know probably that Emilia-Romagna is home to Parmigiano Reggiano, prosciutto. So a lot of good things going on in that region. And then we go down a little bit to Tuscany, and of course, kind of the artistic capital of Italy, and that's where Florence is located. And then from there, you probably all know of Chianti, which is probably the most famous red wine that comes out of Florence. But that's made with the other primary red grape of Italy called Sangiovese. And that's also home to probably some of the most expensive Italian wines, which are called Super Tuscans. And they're wines that use Sangiovese, but they also blend in Bordeaux varietals. And because they use Bordeaux varietals like Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, they can't be called Chianti. So there's a kind of a category called Super Tuscans. And those are kind of the big, $700,000 red wines that come out of Tuscany. But that's where they're found. And then that's where we also find probably the most famous white wine in Italy, which is also from Tuscany, called Vernaccia, which is unique to that region. It's an incredibly delicious wine. And then Vincento, that if you have ever been to a little Italian cafe and you have little biscotti, many times you get a little glass of Vincento to go with that. And then all the way down here at the bottom, we have the little island of Sicily. And I think in terms of, the area that I've really become most fond of recently, at least in the last couple of years, is probably Sicily. And we all know of Palermo from the Godfather movies, but Sicily is really home to some pretty amazing wine growing there. Mount Etna, which is on Sicily, right at the foothills of the mountain, are kind of prime real estate for some pretty amazing red wines and white wines. I guess, just historically, most people know of Marsala wine. Marsala wine comes from Sicily, but in terms of really high quality table wines, two grapes that I have just fallen in love with are both red grapes called Nero d'Avola. And then the other one is Nerello Mascalese. And Nerello Mascalese makes up not only a really amazing red table wine, but it also makes some dynamite rosé. And they're great values. And if you want to learn a little bit more about them, we won't cover them tonight, but if you want to know a little bit more about those and some recommendations, please send me an email and I'll be happy to shoot you a list of some of my favorite wines that are available around Birmingham and then in wider national markets, but kind of way off the beaten path for many of us, but definitely worth getting to know. So that's kind of the helicopter ride over Italy. We're going to start up there in the Veneto, near the Adriatic Sea. And you'll notice that the Treviso DOC is not only a designated viticultural area, and we'll look at the bottle of Prosecco and you'll see Treviso on there, but that is at about 45 degrees latitude. And I always talk about the importance of knowing the latitude in terms of where the grapes come from. As we've talked about before, the latitudes that promote the most high quality grape growing are between the 50th parallel, which is kind of the top end of almost where it's too cold, and then the 30th parallel, which is kind of at the bottom of where it's almost too warm. But most of the world's fine top growing wine growing regions fall somewhere between the 50th and 30th parallel. So if you think about it, Champagne is right at the 50th level, 50th degree parallel, very cold there. So 45 degrees is getting up there. That's pretty far north. And so that's why it's a great spot for things like Pinot Grigio and Prosecco. So in that Treviso DOC, that's kind of, it's a little bit inland from Venice, but that's really the heart of Prosecco country. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And there's a little town in that region called Val d'Obiadini, and that's kind of the historic home of Prosecco. And Prosecco is now kind of talked about as a region. It actually used to be the name of the grape that's in the bottle. They just kind of called it Prosecco. We'll talk about that. The name of the grape is actually Glera, G-L-E-R-A, but that's the white grape that they use to make Prosecco. So let's go ahead and look at the bottle. If you grab the bottle, we're going to notice a few things here. You'll notice that on the foil top, there was a little strip of like a blue little strip of paper there. And that light blue strip is on all three of the wines that we have tonight. And it's a designation that's put on by the governing wine authority. And it designates that it's a top quality Italian wine. And you'll see the letters DOC on there. So at the top tier of the highest quality wines in Italy, you have two designations, DOC and DOCG. And the DOCG is kind of at the very top of the pyramid. But DOC means that it's a high quality wine. It's met all of the rigorous standards for production, for alcohol level, all of the things that you're looking for in a great wine. So that is a kind of a vertical strip on the Prosecco, but on the other two wines, you'll see it around the neck of the bottle. So you'll see on the you'll see in the bottle here, you see Mianetto. So that's the producer of the Prosecco. And then Prosecco is the wine. And then below you see the DOC Treviso. And that's the authorized growing region where the grapes come from. That's where the Glera is grown. But like all of these wines tonight, you don't see the grape name on the bottle. And as we've talked about before, when we've looked at wines from Spain and France and Germany and Austria, in European countries, it's really all about the place name. It's about the history of where the grapes come from. So for the Europeans, it's more about celebrating the place name than it is about the grapes. So you have to do a little bit of study and figure out what grapes actually in the bottle. So you won't see the word Glera on here, but that's the grape that goes into Prosecco. And then you see the word Brut, and that's a word that you probably associate with champagne or other sparkling wines. And that just lets you know that the wine is going to be fairly dry, or in other words, it's not a sweet wine. Totally different wine than, say, Moscato d'Asti, which has a good kick of residual sugar. Prosecco can come in a number of different styles. It can come in a kind of an off-dry, slightly sweet style. But when you see Brut on any sparkling wine, that's your indication that it's going to be a dry wine. So, and that's also, I'd say, the lion's share, maybe up north of 75, 80% of all the sparkling wine that's produced in the world is made in the Brut style. The other thing that you do not see on the label is a vintage date. The other two wines have a vintage date, but the Prosecco doesn't. And that's because it's labeled as a non-vintage. So if you're at a restaurant and you see NV on the menu, whether it's a California sparkling wine from Sonoma or Carneros or Prosecco or a champagne, that just means it's non-vintage. And what they do is they take wines across a number of different vintages and they blend these grapes to make a house style. So they don't put a vintage date on there, so you won't see one. Doesn't mean it's low quality. That just means that it's a blend from across a number of vintages. So that's important to know when it comes to sparkling wine. So if you have some in your glass, let's go ahead and look at the wine in the glass. So you can just look at it, and if you have like a white piece of paper or a white plate, it's good to hold it against there. And a couple of things that you'll see right away is that it's a really light wine. It's kind of that light straw color, has some bright yellow highlights. And without even tasting or smelling this wine, you can look at it and know a few things. The first thing you know is the fact that it's so light in color. It probably doesn't have any oak aging, because if it had spent time in oak, the charred inside of that oak barrel would impart some color to the wine and make it darker, maybe a darker golden color. Like the kind of golden yellowish kind of hue that you see in oak-aged Chardonnay. That's definitely not what's in this glass. The other thing that the light color of the wine tells you is that it's from a cool region. As we've talked about in the past, during photosynthesis, even with a green grape, the more sunshine that it gets, the grape turns from a slightly yellow color to a darker green color. And so when you have these yellow highlights rather than more of a richer greenish yellow hue, mostly in that kind of darker straw color, you can tell that that it hasn't had a ton of sunlight. And that's really what you get up in those cooler regions of the Veneto. Cool temperatures, not a ton of sunshine. And so what you get are these light, crisp wines, but you can just look at it and just tell that it's going to be a crisp, kind of lighter styled wine. So, back to the color that kind of lets you know that it hasn't been aged in oak. These wines are all fermented in big stainless steel tanks. So they get no additional color or flavoring. It's all done in stainless steel. So I know there's some bubbles in this wine, but let's go ahead and kind of take a sniff and see what you think. Sometimes when you are sniffing sparkling wine, or at least I find when I'm sniffing sparkling wine, I kind of feel like I'm getting some of the bubbles up my nose, but let's just see what we think. So a couple of big sniffs. Yeah, I'm you know, I get some apples and you know, maybe maybe some stone fruit, peachish, some aromas of peach, and maybe even maybe a little honey. I guess maybe that's I don't know. I get some honey. Anybody else want to either share in the chat something that they're kind of pick up on the aroma, or if they want to unmute themselves? But it definitely has that kind of crisp kind of I think of pears and apples. That's best way I can describe it. So let's see if that's confirmed when we have a taste. So take a sip, kind of let it sit in your mouth for a second, kind of swish it around. Yeah, I love that. This is good. That kind of bubbly, I can feel it just kind of, you know, dancing on my tongue, but there's a certain amount of creaminess to it that I just love. Again, I'm still picking up that crisp apple. To me, I feel like I just took an apple right out of the refrigerator and kind of bit into it. And it kind of echoes that same juiciness. You know, like if you have an apple right out of the refrigerator and you get some sweetness or some of that fruit, but it also causes the sides of your tongue to, your mouth to water, which I think is just absolutely a wonderful, wonderful experience. Yeah, Andrea, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, that apple taste is there, and and again, that kind of tips its hat to things that it might pair really well with. I mean, there are a number of foods that Prosecco really latches up really nicely with, but just a platter of like sliced apples and pears and some cheese, and man, I mean, it's so easy to enjoy a glass of Prosecco. It's really wonderful. And the other thing that I wanted to say about this was that cool weather also lends itself to alcohol that's fairly low. I mean, a wine that's fairly low in alcohol. So if you look at the bottle, you can tell, but most of your red table wines fall into that kind of 12 to 13, 14% alcohol. Prosecco is actually around 10 to 11% alcohol. So it's fairly low in alcohol, which means you can, have maybe a couple of glasses more. It's good in the morning. It's good in the afternoon. It's good around brunch. I don't know. I'm sure I'm the only one out there that enjoys a glass of Prosecco on a game day weekend around 10:30 or 11 in the morning. But Prosecco is great, and it's but a lot of that of its drinkability comes from the fact that it has bubbles, and it's pretty low in alcohol. So I'm going to pause there for a second, take some questions. I see a few coming in right now, so I'm going to answer those. Let me see here. So Andrea asked, what's the difference between Prosecco and Champagne? And that's a great question, Andrea. Get that all the time. And I think the best way for me to, I guess, explain that is that Champagne is not just a region, but it's also a way of making sparkling wine, okay? So there's a unique process that was invented by the monks in Champagne. And what happens is there's a first fermentation where they take the grapes that are used in Champagne, and traditionally that's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and another red grape called Pinot Meunier. So you have two purple grapes and one green grape that go into a sparkling wine that is clear like this, okay? So get your mind around that. So they ferment those wines, and again, they take those wines from across multiple vintages and they blend those together into what the French call a cuvée, which just means blend. Then they put that blend back in the bottle. So they would take the Champagne bottle and they would fill it back up with that blend of wine. Well, this time what they do is they put a little more yeast and a little bit of sugar in that bottle, and they put a top on it. And what happens is the sugar and the yeast start a secondary fermentation, second fermentation in the bottle. But this time, because the lid is on the bottle, the CO2 stays in the bottle and dissolves into the liquid. And so that's what's unique about Champagne. It undergoes a secondary fermentation in the bottle. So it's unique to Champagne, but it's also unique to many other wines around the world. So as I mentioned, Franciacorta, which is made in Lombardy, is an Italian white wine or Italian sparkling wine that's made in the Champagne method. Cava in Spain is made in the Champagne method. So those are wines that get a secondary fermentation. Prosecco is made in what's called the Charmat method. So they make their blend, they put it into a tank, and they inoculate the wine with CO2 in a big tank. So it doesn't undergo a second fermentation in the bottle. It has that, gets its bubbles while it's still in that big stainless steel tank. And what that does is it keeps Prosecco and like wines fresh and enjoyable. That's really kind of the hallmark. And that, if you have a Prosecco and you're tasting it next to a Champagne, Champagne is just a little more complex. It's a little more serious. I think they're both delicious wines and have their place around the table. But Prosecco is just meant to be maybe a little less serious, a little more fun to drink. It's kind of like, Champagne might be wearing a blazer or a suit, Prosecco is more like jeans and a t-shirt or maybe shorts. They're both perfectly comfortable and have their place in terms of how you might show up somewhere, but one's just a little more casual than the other. So does that help answer that, Andrea? I see another question here about the price of Prosecco. And yes, that is why Prosecco is cheaper, because there's less time involved in the making of it. So champagne has to undergo that second fermentation in the bottle, which takes several months. And then by law, it has to age anywhere from 18 to 24 months in the bottle before it can be released. So there's a lot more capital investment, if you will, locked up in a bottle of champagne than there is in Prosecco. And also, champagne can command a slightly higher price because of its kind of refinement, the products that go into it. But just the way it's made, the champagne method versus the Charmat method is really one of the big drivers behind the price of champagne and of Prosecco. Another question from Cameron: if you're making mimosas, is it better to use champagne or Prosecco? Well, that's a pretty weighted question there, Cameron. I'd say whatever you have that's next to you that has bubbles in it. Mimosas are awesome with both of them. If you're going to be hosting a brunch tomorrow and you just want to keep it light and easy, go get yourself some Prosecco or get some Cava. If you want to make it a little more fancy or upscale, champagne is certainly appropriate, whether you're having mimosas or Kir Royales or anything you're going to mix with it. But most people, I think these days, if I'm at a party or a brunch, I see most people using Cava or Prosecco if they're making mimosas or the like. So great questions. Anything else? I would say, in terms of food pairings, not sure what y'all are enjoying tonight, but I love Prosecco with prosciutto. You've got these two great Italian products. You've got that really rich, deeply flavored, salty prosciutto. And when you have that with a glass of Prosecco, man, it is just dynamite. I love it. I like Prosecco with raw oysters or steamed oysters, grilled oysters. One of my favorite pairings, I did a wine event last night, and one of the recipes that we looked at were these kettle chips that had Parmesan cheese and cracked black pepper and a little truffle oil on top. But Prosecco and those kettle chips, that's like a shame spiral couch food. Get a bag of kettle chips and a bottle of Prosecco and just like stand back. That's a great one. Smoked salmon is another terrific pairing with Prosecco. And like most sparkling wines, Prosecco just plays well with everyone. It's like the kid that goes to the playground and gets along with everybody. Anything with bubbles is usually a really, really super place to start. And yes, Scott, I see homemade oven fries. Yes, especially if you've got a little mayo that you're dipping those fries in, and then swigging some Prosecco. That's always a dynamite pairing. So well done there. Well done. How's everyone doing? Okay, well, I'm going to turn my screen back or share my screen again, and we're going to just quickly look at our map again, because now we are going to kick down to central Italy, to Umbria. And Umbria is kind of tucked in right next to Tuscany, and kind of butts up to Lazio. But one of the things that's kind of really unique about Italy, and you don't often think about it unless you are looking at the map, but Umbria is one of the few landlocked wine growing regions in Italy. Most of the regions have some kind of coastline, which gives them ready access to the cooling influence of the Mediterranean or one of these, micro seas that surround their coast. But Umbria, for its part, is landlocked. And the other thing that's unique about Umbria is going from top to bottom, from the top of the boot all the way down to the bottom, is a mountain range, the Apennines, and it runs down that spine right through the middle of Italy. And it actually runs right through the middle of Umbria. So you have this really craggy, rugged mountain range that runs right through the region. So you have lots of opportunities for these slopes and the foothills of the mountains that really give a lot of sun exposure, and they allow for some really terrific winemaking there. The other thing that's unique about Orvieto, we often hear a lot of wonderful things about Tuscany and Piedmont, and deservedly so, amazing world-class wines. But when it comes to winemaking, not just in Italy, but as Central, Western, and Eastern Europe as it goes, some of the earliest winemaking traditions were found in Orvieto. The Etruscans were some of the first folks to make wine in Europe and certainly in Italy. And the thing that they discovered in Orvieto and this region of Umbria is the limestone soils. Now, limestone is kind of the, a lot of wonderful things have been said and written about limestone soils and wine. Limestone soils are what's behind Champagne. Beneath this, beneath the ground level of Champagne is just this network of underground limestone caves. That soft, chalky soil is what gives that amazing minerality to their wines. Chablis is another area that is renowned for its limestone soil. So those Chardonnays out of Burgundy and that northern part of Chablis, again, the hallmark is that wonderful minerality that comes from the limestone. If you've ever been to bourbon country in Kentucky, any of those bourbon distillers and bourbon makers will tell you that the secret to their bourbon is the limestone in that soil and the water that trickles through there. And that's at the heart of what makes those mash bills that they, the secret mash bills that make the distillate that goes into making their bourbon. But it starts with that limestone soil. And the same is true here with Orvieto. And hopefully we'll taste a little bit of that minerality in the glass when we taste the wine. So like we did with the Prosecco, let's go ahead and look at the bottle. And so you see here at the top, you see Ruffino, and that's the producer. Ruffino makes quite a number of different wines. They make a whole category of red, white wines from all over Italy, but Ruffino is the producer. And then you see Orvieto Classico, and that's the designated wine growing region, is the Classico region of Orvieto. And here at the top, you can see the little DOC designation official ribbon that goes around it, and you can see the serial number and everything. So the Italians are the French are too, and the Germans, everybody in Europe is real serious about their wine and cheese and cured meats and all that stuff. But the Italians, for some reason, are the ones that are very serious about putting this tracking label on top. But you see Orvieto Classico, and here you see 2018. And that's the year, that's the vintage date, and that's the year that the grapes that went into this wine, that's the year that they were harvested. So they might undergo some bottle aging, a wine might undergo some barrel aging, but what the date that shows up on the label is the year that the grapes were harvested. So if you go to a restaurant tomorrow night and you get a 1973 Bordeaux, those grapes were picked in 1973, okay? So just so you know a little bit about the vintage date. And like the Prosecco, we don't see the grape name on the bottle. And Sometimes that can throw people off because Orvieto is the region, it's not the grape. The grape in this wine is a grape called Trebbiano, and that's probably the most widely grown white grape in all of Italy. And frankly, it's one of the most widely grown grapes in France, where it goes by another name, Uni Blanc. But Trebbiano you find in many, many white wines in Italy, regardless of the place name. Many times it's got Trebbiano in the bottle. So if you like this wine, you like wines from Orvieto, but you also like the Trebbiano grape, okay? So like we did with the Prosecco, let's look at this wine. And to me, this wine has a little more color to it. It's not quite as light as the Prosecco. And that would make sense because we went from the north of Italy down to central Italy, and we're near this mountain range. So these grapes get a little more sun exposure. So you get a little bit more ripeness. And that's where you're getting a little bit of that extra color. I mean, it's not like a dark wine. It still has that kind of darker straw, but you can tell just by looking at it that it's probably coming from a slightly warmer growing region than that Prosecco, which was much clearer. So, and I would say that, you know, we'll take a sniff and see if we smell any oak influence, but while it's a little bit darker than the Prosecco, to me, it's still not dark like you would find an oak-aged Chardonnay. It doesn't have that heavy yellow color or that more honeyed color. It still has a lot of kind of green yellow tint to it. So my guess would be probably no oak aging. So let's give it a sniff and see what we think. Yeah, this one, again, I'm like the Prosecco, definitely get some apples and pears, but this one, I get a lot more kind of floral. I'm not sure. I'd love if someone out there kind of is kind of tracking whatever you smell. I'm definitely getting some kind of a floral element that tells me that it's has a little more ripeness, had a little more sun exposure, had the ability to develop some of those deeper flavors. Yeah, this is smells terrific. So let's give it a taste. Yeah, wow, this is a delicious little wine. I'm telling you, if you guys are kind of stuck on Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio, I'm telling you, Orvieto is a absolute steal, and it is great with food. My mouth is just watering. It's wonderful. It's like this lemon lime zest thing going on. It's nice and crisp, but it has this roundness to it. And I hope y'all are kind of picking up on that. It's still a light bodied wine, but it has a roundness to it, a fullness, which just gives it a great mouthfeel and makes it really great with food. But and I can definitely pick up on that floral element to it that I was getting on the nose. Susan said, it kind of reminds me of muscadine grapes, and I am absolutely tracking with you. I think some of that floral note is what we kind of pick up in muscadines and scuppernauds, except that's like on 11 in muscadines. Here it's a little more subtle, but definitely has, I hear you on that. That's a very good call. Amanda looks like she loves this one. Yeah, I mean, when I have this, and again, I have to remind myself that there's so many great white wine options out there outside of just like Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. And this is definitely one of them. Great wine by the glass in the afternoon when it's warm. It'll be great. Even now that, the weather's changing a little bit, it's just a nice, light, refreshing afternoon wine. Definitely great with appetizers. As I was thinking about this wine earlier today, it reminded me, and I'm going to embarrass my mom for a second. I actually think she's on the tasting tonight, but she makes this amazing butternut squash soup, And this wine and butternut squash soup would be a fantastic pairing if you put some like toasted pumpkin seeds and maybe a little feta cheese on top of it. This is a great wine with soup. It's a great wine with fresh tomato salads that you could drizzle with a little olive oil. It's great with blue vein cheeses like Italian gorgonzola. This would be another one of those candidates for spicy food. So if you like sushi or that had some heat to it, or certainly like a Thai noodle salad with little bird-eye chilies or a spicy Thai or Indian curry, this would be a terrific wine. And it's that kind of floral roundness that would help to kind of saw off or sand down some of the really hot edges of that chili pepper. But to me, this is just a really delicious wine. Yeah, and I definitely get that crispness, but yet can really sense the fact that it's coming from a slightly warmer region, not hot, but more sunshine, slightly longer ripening season with more sunshine than what we saw up in the Veneto. So let's see how to store this. Okay, well, I'm going to answer that two ways. If you have already opened it and you don't drink the whole bottle, Orvieto is a perfect candidate to just put the top back on or put a cork in it and put it in the refrigerator. It has enough acidity that it'll last another 24, 48 hours with no problem at all. White wines that are crisp, have high acidity, are perfect candidates for just storing in the refrigerator. If you buy it from the store, like all wines, you just want to store it in a nice, dark, cool spot that doesn't have a lot of temperature shifts, and you should be good. But Orvieto is meant to buy it and crack it open about an hour later, or chill it and open it. Enjoy it that night. Enjoy it that day. It's just a kind of one of those wines that's perfect with friends. But great question. And Amanda and Eva, I just want to make sure that I answered that the right way, right? Yeah, Andrea. Yeah, this is definitely one of those that goes quick. And the thing is like many Italian white wines that people are a little nervous about. You see them. There's Gavi and like Vernaccia, Orvieto. They just sound weird. They're these weird names that we don't know, and so people are a little apprehensive. And then they have a sip of it, and they're like, "Holy smokes! Where have these wines been my whole life?" Because again, they have many of the same components that we love about grapes like Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Gruner Veltliner. That whole kind of category of more well-known white grapes. But this is definitely one to consider. I don't know about where y'all purchased it, but I mean, you got to work hard to find an Orvieto that's over $10. I mean, it's a great value. And again, it's just a super delicious wine, whether it's in the afternoon or you're just kind of sitting down for a first course, a salad or a soup or something. So anybody have the enough wine in them at this point to unmute themselves and share a little bit about what they're having this Orvieto with, what kind of cheese or what kind of nibbles you might be having? I'd love to hear what's going on. I mean, we're getting some great comments here on the chat, but would love to hear what somebody's doing there in with their group. I hear somebody trying.
Hey, Scott, this is Andrea and Kenneth for the first time. My husband is joining for the first time. He is so excited.
Oh, great. Awesome.
We're having some goat, garlic and herb goat's milk cheese.
Oh, yes.
It's so delicious in the variety cracker case. And he's having some salami with it. And we're also about to embark on some fresh mozzarella and tomatoes. So this is,
oh man.
Yeah.
You're checking all the boxes. Well, listen, next time, please invite me over and we'll just do the one event from your dining room or living room or patio or wherever you're doing it. Cause you've got it dialed in. I'll tell you, fresh goat cheese, especially with those herbs and that garlic, that tanginess of that goat cheese and the tanginess of this wine, it's like I mean, it just, they just partner together so well. And again, you heard what I said earlier about fresh tomatoes and Orvieto. So you guys have got it dialed in the right way. Good for you. It looks like Susan is having some mushrooms and a noodle stir fry, a little bit of spice. Again, perfect pairing with this wine. You just can't go wrong with it. I always find that if I have this with spicy food, I start, this wine starts going down pretty easy because it's, for me, I got that kind of citrusy lemon lime thing. So it's not quite adult lemonade, but it's got a really wonderful, easy drinking quality to it that makes it a good wine to go along with something like one of those stir fries with noodles. So good for you. Y'all are sound like having a wonderful evening. So appreciate the feedback. Okay, so let's, I'm going to share the screen one more time, and we're going to talk about the Abruzzo, and you can see that we're going just a little bit further south to Abruzzo, and this is where I'm going to kind of pause for one quick second, and if you haven't already done so, go ahead and get the Abruzzo, because I want y'all to be sipping while I'm talking about this. There's something that I just think it will help enhance the experience, because I'm about to lay a whole bunch of information on you, and I think it'll help to open your minds if you're enjoying some red wine. Okay, now we're in the region of Abruzzo, and the red grape is the Montepulciano red grape, and that's why it's called Montepulciano di Abruzzo. So it's the Montepulciano grape of Abruzzo. So just kind of deconstructing what's on the label there. So, but that Montepulciano, to me, in my humble opinion, is one of the most confusing subjects in Italian wine, okay? So if you're ready, I'm getting ready to step into it. So Montepulciano is a grape and a place. So the grape is grown in Abruzzo. That's the wine we're drinking tonight. But it's also a place in Tuscany, and it's home to one of the best known Tuscan wines called Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, which is a little town in Tuscany. There's a little town called Montepulciano in Tuscany, and that's where this red wine comes from. But that red wine is made with the grape Sangiovese. The wine that we're having tonight is made with the grape Montepulciano. Okay, so that just gets your head spinning. So to further confuse you, there's often this misunderstanding between Montepulciano and Montalcino. So again, Montepulciano is the grape that we're having in this wine. It's the town in Tuscany, but there's also a town called Montalcino in Tuscany, and they make a wine called Brunello di Montalcino in Tuscany. But here's another mind bender around that. Brunello is the local name for Sangiovese, which is the grape that's in Vino Nobile di Montalcino. It's the red grape that's in Chianti. So that is, to me, just one of those things that absolutely blows my mind. And, when I think about it, I don't know about y'all, but this is definitely one of those times where I need a drink of red wine just to get my mind back to back grounded again. So it looks like the Dunbars have been to Montepulciano, and yes, Scott, it is a phenomenal place. It really is. But it's probably easier to get your head around when you're there and you have context to understand Tuscany and the many different little subzones of not only Chianti, but then those little towns like Montepulciano and Montalcino. But when you get outside of Tuscany and you get a little further down to Rome and you start seeing this wine, Montepulciano di Abruzzo, you're like, what the heck's going on? But like the Orvieto, I just will say, again, in my humble opinion, Abruzzo is one of my favorite spots in Italy for value priced, easy drinking, always high quality red wines. Anytime I'm in a wine store and I'm, heading to a friend's house or something, not that I don't want to, spend 50 bucks on a Barolo or, 35, 40 bucks on, a really nice Chianti. But if I can spend 15 bucks on a wine from Abruzzo, one of these Montepulcianos, it always is a big hit. It's so great with food, whether we're having burgers or lasagna or pizza. It's just a terrific, really easy drinking wine. So I wanted you to know a little bit about that. I know it's a lot, but I hope that at some point you'll have the recall and it'll make a little bit of sense. So I'll turn the slide off and we'll look at the bottle. For those of you who did get this lovely little bottle, the first thing you'll see is the little straw and the grapevine that's tied to the bottle. I imagine, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know the story, but my guess is there's a really wonderful story or this urban legend behind this bottle and why it has the straw and the little piece of grapevine on it. But from a practical standpoint, if you love this wine, just look for the red wine with the straw and the little sprig of grape here of vine, because you don't, at least I don't see this very often at my Publix or Target. So, it's just a good thing to remember. Anyway, you see the producer at the top, and I'm not going to try and butcher the family's name, but I do know it's Cantina. But then here you see the Montepulciano di Abruzzo. So again, that's the grape of Abruzzo. So that's the region. We see that this has a vintage date of 2017. So the grapes were harvested in 2017, which is, right now, most of the wines that you see in the marketplace, if they're red wines, they're generally 2017s. So they've had a little bit of time in the bottle to kind of, especially if they're young wines, for the tannins to smooth out a little bit, for the wine to mature a little bit in the bottle. But let's go ahead and look at the wine in the glass. Again, if you have a chance to look at it against some paper, you can see that it's a dark wine, but it's not completely opaque like you would see in a big, heavy Syrah or Cabernet Sauvignon. A little bit of light gets through it, but it's definitely has that rich kind of ruby, dark purple color. You could know that it's going to be a hearty wine, but it's not going to be maybe as big and bold as a red wine that would be completely opaque. So again, just trying to give you some tools that you can use just by looking at the wine. Okay, so let's give it a smell. Yeah, and this is I've opened mine. I opened my wine around 6:15, so it's been open for a little bit. It's had a chance to open up a little bit. I definitely get some blueberry and blackberry. I get a little bit of that smokiness, maybe some spice, but I definitely pick up on a little bit of that smokiness. So I can tell that it's had some oak aging, not a ton, but I can definitely get that spicy oaky, some of that spiciness which comes from the oak aging. So let's go ahead and take a sip. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So mouth is watering, top of my tongue, definitely getting that drying effect of the tannins. But my mouth is watering. I'm getting the kind of the blackberry, some of that cherry fruit. Still, my mouth is watering, but I definitely get some of the softer tannins, but definitely some tannins. When you have a red wine and you feel that drying sensation under your lips and on top of your tongue, those are the tannins in the wine. Those come from the grape skins, and they allow the wine to age. That's what gives the red wine ageability. It's also the kind of, it's like acidity in white wine, tannins in red wine function as something that helps cut through the richness. So if you had like a juicy burger, or you had like a steak that had some marbling, the tannins really help to kind of cleanse the palate and cut through some of that richness. And that's what makes this so good and so versatile at the table. Again, whether you were having a real cheesy, lasagna, or you had like a grilled sirloin, or if you had like a big hunk of Parmigiano Reggiano, which is wonderful with this wine. It helps to cleanse the palate and come alongside some of those bolder foods. But yeah, this wine is a lot of fun to drink. I think I'm getting a little bit of licorice. I definitely am getting some spice there, maybe some cinnamon, but it has a little bit of a kind of a licorice quality. Yeah, let me see. I'm getting some feedback here about this. Let's see. So Andrea wanted to know about the breathing of the wine, and that's a great question. And this red wine is a perfect example of a wine that might be benefit from some aging, especially young wines that have a vintage date of 2017, 2018. They're very youthful, and allowing them to mix with wine, mix with air. You can open it up, pour it into a glass. You can decant it into a carafe or a plastic pitcher. You don't have to get fancy. What you want to do is you just want to mix some air in there, because the air allows a lot of those compounds that have been locked up in the wine to be released. There are a lot of volatile components in wine, one of those being alcohol. So like when you swirl the wine, when you're swirling the wine in your glass, you're mixing air into the wine, which is actually allowing it to breathe. And just like if you spray perfume or cologne on your arm, the delivery device, if you will, is the alcohol. The alcohol dries, the perfume sticks. The same thing happens with wine. As you swirl the wine, the alcohol, which is volatile, coats the side of the glass. The alcohol evaporates, so what you're left with are the aromas from those fruit flavors, those secondary aromas that you get from the barrel, the vanilla, the spice that come from the barrel. And so that's allowing the wine to breathe. So you kind of do it on a micro level when you're swirling it, or you can put it down and swirl it, but you also do it on a kind of a larger scale when you decant it. So I just like to do that with young red wines. It's not critical. I just do it because I think it enhances the wine, allows you to get to the optimal enjoyment of the wine quicker. But again, don't stress about it. Don't, get fussy about it. If you can open it up 15 minutes ahead or 30 minutes ahead, that's great. But there's some method to the madness, I guess, if you will. There's a real reason why you would do that. So Andrea, I hope that answered your question. And Amanda, yeah, I see that you picked up on that licorice too. There's just something about this Montepulciano grape that has that little licorice element to it. And again, I think that's what gives it a real wonderful kind of makes you hungry. It makes you want to eat. There are these amazing flavors that latch up to some of the foods that you would enjoy it with, but really complements some of those red berry, blackberry, blueberry, the cherry aromas. So what do you guys think about this one? For those of you who are new to the wines of Abruzzo or Montepulciano grape, what do you think about that? This as compared to, say, a Merlot or a Pinot Noir. This is kind of, midway in the, if you think about light to full-bodied wines, this is about midway in there. So it's a great table wine, whether you're having a big dinner party or, I don't know, you're serving Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, it goes well with so many different foods in it. Easy to drink, fairly smooth, and also, again, kind of priced right. Makes it good on a Wednesday night just as much as it would on a Friday night. hanging out with friends. So hope y'all enjoyed this one. Any comments? Anyone want to unmute themselves and step into the wild and woolly world of live comments?
Hey, this is Eva.
Hey, Eva.
I'd be interested in, kind of compare contrast
Yeah.
some of these wines with California wines. What do you see
Sure.
here in the U.S.?
Absolutely. That's a great question. The way I'm going to answer that is I'm going to compare it to wines along the West Coast. What you would get, especially in this Abruzzo, is and if you'll and Eva, if you'll let me just share my screen real quick, this will help to kind of drive home that point. So if you see that a Abruzzo, for example, is at a latitude of 42 degrees, okay? So even though it's a little further down into kind of lower central Italy, it's still much higher in latitude than most of California, okay? California, even the places that you think of being cool in California are still much further south than most of the vineyards that we're looking at tonight, or all the vineyards that we're looking tonight in Italy. So the wines in California, by their very nature in terms of the climate, are going to have more sun exposure. So they're going to have a little more alcohol. They're going to have more ripeness, because when you have more ripeness, you have more sugar. When you have more sugar during fermentation, if you ferment it to a dry state, well, then you're going to have high alcohol. They're going to have less acidity generally, because the warmer the climate, the less acidity, residual acidity that hangs around in the wine. But that's not to say that wines of Napa and Sonoma aren't wonderful. They make amazing wines. They're just going to be riper expressions of even the same grape. So if you take a Cabernet Sauvignon grape and grow it in Napa Valley, and take that same grape and grow it in Bordeaux, or you grow it in Tuscany, which they grow a lot of Cabernet and Merlot in Tuscany, it's going to be a much different expression, because California generally is going to be warmer. Now, having said that, and this is going to be kind of a little bit of a weird statement, because I just said that even Napa and Sonoma are more southern than Italy, than this Abruzzo. If you go south of Napa and Sonoma, south of the Bay Area, down to Monterey County, which is much further south than Napa and Sonoma, it's actually much cooler there, because those vineyards are very close, like less than 10 miles, sometimes less than 5 miles from the Pacific Ocean, which is very chilly. If you guys have done any swimming in the Pacific there near Monterey or the Bay Area, that water is freezing cold. I'm talking like 58 degrees. And so that has a cooling influence on the vineyards around the Central Coast. So those wines, those cabs, those Chardonnays tend to be more like the wines that we're having tonight. Then if you go to Oregon and Washington, which is now you're starting to get in, Oregon is on a similar latitude of, say, Burgundy in France. Washington is even further north in latitude, and now you're getting to a latitude that's similar to what you're seeing in the north of Italy, kind of Alsace in France, maybe the Loire Valley. You're starting to get in a zone that is more similar to what you're seeing here. And even in Washington, you get a lot of sunshine, because there's the Cascade Mountains run right down basically the coast of Washington, and it creates this rain shadow. So everything east of, say, Seattle doesn't get a lot of rain, but they get a ton of sunshine, high elevation. So they get to ripen, but it's nice and cool, just like what you're seeing in Abruzzo. So if you like this style of wine, you're probably going to like wines from, say, Washington State, which they grow some amazing cabs and Merlots and Syrahs. They even grow a little Sangiovese there. Or the wines of the Central Coast of California from, say, Monterey County down to Santa Barbara, where it's a little bit cooler. So that's kind of the helicopter ride. I know it's a ton of information, and that's a whole nother class. I could talk all night about that, but that's really, in a nutshell, a good way, I think, for me to explain kind of the difference, and more importantly, to help you as a consumer get dialed in. When you're at the store and you're standing there, there's that wall of wine. You're like, what the heck do I buy? Well, if you like this style of wine, you're probably going to like a wine from Washington State. And by the way, I did a few weeks back an entire tasting around the wines of Washington. Another one of my favorite places for super high quality wines, super value. I mean, hard to buy a bad wine from Washington State. So I hope that helps. Is that good? Okay, thumbs up. All right, anyone else have any questions? I know we're past 8 o'clock. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I'm happy to hang out and answer some more questions. If anyone has them, please unmute yourself and fire away, whether it's related to these wines, another wine region, food and wine pairing. Happy to answer anything and everything the best I can. Bueller.
This is not specifically related to any of the wines or anything, but
okay.
You going to dare to do these during football season, or what's your thought to be in this deep South here? We would like it.
Oh man, listen, I'm going to pull the total football card. I think I might do like a little 30-minute micro halftime wine tasting sometimes. I don't know. The feedback has been pretty positive to like keep doing these through football season.
We would love it if you did.
I'll probably stick to doing them on a Friday night versus a Saturday night. Historically, I've done them on Saturday nights because I tend to book a lot of in-person events on Friday, but I'll probably shift them to Friday night. Now, that being said, my family and I are longtime Ole Miss season ticket holders, so there might be a time when I might be having to do these from Oxford, but I do intend seriously to keep these sessions going because the feedback's just been such that there's so many more topics that folks want me to cover, and I love meeting with y'all and talking about wine and getting a chance to kind of pour out my knowledge and answer questions and hopefully inspire everyone and give everyone a little more confidence. So yeah, I'll probably shift them to Friday night and try not to do it on a night where like next Saturday night will not be a good night to do a virtual wine tasting, since every single SEC team is playing at some point during that 18-hour stretch. So I'll try and be as strategic as I can, but I'll definitely keep doing these through the fall, Lord willing. So great. I appreciate you asking that. Yeah.
We're so glad.
Thank you. We're excited.
Yeah, good. Let's see. Yes, there's a question. The difference between Tuscan and Super Tuscan. Great question. So in a nutshell, a Tuscan wine we think of traditionally as Chianti. Chianti is the big, historic red wine of Tuscany, and there are lots of different kind of designations within the within Chianti, and it's different zones that you're able to make Chianti. But by law, in order to call it Chianti, it has to have mostly Sangiovese. It has to be grown in some very specific regions within this Chianti zone, and there's some other regulations around the amount of fruit that can be harvested, all these little things, but it's really mostly about the grapes that can go into a wine that can legally be called Chianti. Well, back in the late 70s, early 80s, these young winemakers got together and said, you know what? We love the history of Chianti and the Sangiovese grape. We love it, but we also know that Cabernet and Cabernet Franc and Merlot, the historic red grapes of Bordeaux, also grow really well in Tuscany. So we're going to make a wine, and we're going to blend. We're going to take Sangiovese and blend it with Cabernet and Merlot and Cab Franc, and we're going to make our own proprietary wine because now we're outside of the regulations to be able to legally call it Chianti. So now we're going to have to come up with a proprietary name like Scots wine. And that's where these wines got that name, Super Tuscan. And some of the most famous in the world are wines like Sassicaia, which is a Super Tuscan, and it's one of the most expensive wines in the world and one of the most sought after wines in the world. But it can't be called Chianti because it has Cab and Merlot in not only in included in the bottle, but in proportions that aren't legal to be called Chianti. So that's really what it's all about. That's just a kind of a category called Super Tuscan. And or you might see the word Toscana on the bottle. You see that a lot more now. If it says Toscana, that means that what's in there is a Super Tuscan blend. It's going to have some Bordeaux varietals like Cabernet and Merlot that are mixed with Sangiovese. They're not always expensive, but that's your key word. If you see Toscana on there, that means it's a red wine blend from Tuscany that has grapes in it that don't qualify it for Chianti. That's all that means. And man, there are some dynamite, like under $12 Toscana wines out there right now. Some of them can get super expensive, but there are some red blends out there that are absolutely dynamite. So don't be afraid. If you see the word Toscana, that just means it's a Super Tuscan. It's a red Tuscan blend. So great question. Yeah, so let's see. Tomorrow, so my brother-in-law, Vikings fan, such a sucker, smoking a pork loin tomorrow for Sunday Fun Day. How about a wine suggestion? Well, I would say if you're smoking, Robin, if you're smoking the pork loin tomorrow and you have another bottle of this Abruzzo hanging around, it's going to be a dynamite match with the smokiness from the smoker. You're going to have that wonderful kind of smoke crust from the pork. This would be great with that. Pinot Noir would also be great if you are looking for something maybe a little off the beaten path. A Merlot from Washington State would be great, or one of those red blends from Washington State. All of those wines go really well with barbecue, whether it's pulled pork or a smoked loin. And let's hope the Vikings win, and you don't really care what wine you have. But that would be my recommendation. Grab another bottle of this Abruzzo if you're able to, and I'll be thinking about you tomorrow, buddy. But great question. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
I've got a question. This is my first rodeo. I've never been to a wine tasting before, but
appreciate you joining us.
When I went to go look for this cantina, I couldn't find it. So they had two others that were made from the same region, and I bought those, and then I was able to purchase the one that you had on your list. But the flavor profile of the other two are different from the one that's on your list, and I enjoy the one that's on your list more than the other two. So if they're from the same region, why would their flavor profile, I guess, be different?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing I would say is see if it's a different vintage. That might, give you some clues about, one year being a little bit warmer or cooler than another vintage. And, I guess the other thing too is just, as I mentioned, that there's that mountain range, the Apennines that run right through that region where this wine is grown. And sometimes different elevation can affect flavor. If it's a little bit higher in elevation, well, then you get less fog. It's a little bit cooler at night, so you get more sunshine. If it's a little further down in the foothills or in the valley, you might get a little more fog in the morning. Might not get quite as cool at night. So the grapes might not have quite the acidity. Those are, I guess, in terms of just without knowing what the other wines are, that would be the two things that I would say is check the vintage date first, because there could be a variation between like a 2017, 2018, 2016. And then it would also help to, if you find out the producer of those wines, just kind of, you can Google it and just kind of see where they are in the region to see if one is has vineyards that are a little bit higher elevation or a little more in the valley than the other one, because those can definitely, the soil should be similar, but definitely those elevations in the geography of the landscape will definitely have an effect on the wine. And then also, depending on what kind of barrels they use, sometimes wineries will use brand new barrels that have a lot of flavor, a lot of oak influence. Sometimes wineries will use slightly older barrels that may be 2 or 3 vintages old, and so the oak influence is not quite as forward as some new barrels. So there could be some stylistic changes, but I applaud you for definitely picking up more than one example, because that's one of the really fun ways of learning about a region, is getting the same wine from a very small area and just digging in and seeing what you like about it. So kudos to you, and I hope that you'll come back and join us again. Appreciate the question. Yeah, for sure. Before I go, again, I want to remind all of y'all, tonight's virtual tip jar, Jones Valley Teaching Farm. You can submit your virtual tips via Venmo to Jones is Thirsty. And if you have any questions that pop up, later tonight, you can always email me at scott@jonesisthirsty.com. You can send me a direct message on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Jones is Thirsty. And I promise you're not bothering me. My phone has text messages now from friends who are out having dinner, and they're looking at the wine list and asking me to pick wines for them. So I do this. I love it. Happy to answer any questions that you have anytime. So appreciate y'all being here. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hope to see y'all back at another virtual wine tasting very soon. So thanks so much and have a great night.